تب و تاب تو هم، خانه خراب تو هم، من دیوانه عاشق. ای تو سر و سامان من، نیمه پنهان من، جان تو و جانه عاشق. من عاشقتم تا ابد دور شود چشم بد از تو و دنیای من و تو. ای ماه الهی فقط کم نشه فضایت از شب و روزای من و تو. سوگند به لبخند تو، دل من بند تو، ای مهربا تو جان بخواه. ای تو همه خواهشم، توی آرامشم، ای مهربا تو جان بخواه. سوگند به لبخند تو، دل من بند تو، ای مهربا تو جان بخواه. ای تو همه خواهشم، توی آرامشم، ای مهربا تو جان بخواه. تا میرسی از آتش چشمان تو، یک شهر به هم میریزد. هر بار که میبینمت از دیدنت انگار دلم میریزد. من با تو پر از شوقم و در حیرتم از این شب رویایی. حیرانم از این که تو چرا این همه زیبایی. من در تب و تاب تو هم، خانه خراب تو هم، من دیوانه عاشق. ای تو سر و سامان من، نیمه پنهان من، جان تو و جانه عاشق. من عاشقتم تا ابد دور شود چشم بد از تو و دنیای من و تو. ای ماه الهی فقط کم نشه فضایت از شب و روزای من و تو. سوگند به لبخند تو، دل من بند تو، ای مهربا تو جان بخواه. ای تو همه خواهشم، توی آرامشم، ای مهربا تو جان بخواه. سوگند به لبخند تو، دل من بند تو، ای مهربا تو جان بخواه. ای تو همه خواهشم، توی آرامشم، ای مهربا تو جان بخواه.
معین راهبر.
برای کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرامون، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بیپولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده، برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره ای که میخنده، برای دانش آموزا، برای آینده، برای این بهشت اجباری، برای نخبه های زندانی، برای کودکان افغانی، برای این همه برای غیر تکراری، برای این همه شعارهای تو خالی، برای آوار خونه های پوشالی، برای احساس آرامش، برای خورشید پس از شبای طولانی، برای قرصای اعصاب و بیخوابی، برای مرد میهن آبادی، برای دختری که آرزو داشت پسر بود، برای زن زندگی آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی. برای زن زندگی آزاد.
زن، المرأة، حین، جسد، زندگی، آزادی،
It's not a moment. This is a revolution. Good morning. My name is Mandis Feely, and I am the president of the Middle Eastern and South Asian Association and Women's Caucus here at McGeorge of law, and it is the greatest honor, without being emotional, to stand in front of you today. We do not often get a platform to be able to speak and to be able to tell these stories. So it is my greatest honor. The echoes of our voices as women permeate and transcend all other noise of hate, noise of destruction, noise that does not have love instilled within it. This truly is a revolution, and this is a global movement. This is a movement filled with love, exasperation, with power, and fearlessness. It is my hope that with this event, that you leave this room moving the conversation forward. That you leave this room and instead of seeing it as just a minuscule event, that you actually go and make the change, whether that be a small conversation, whether that be a collaboration, whatever it may be, that you leave this room with new insight and with love to push the ball moving forward. As an Iranian American woman, it is my great honor to have the world watching today. There are people in this room, but there's over 19,000 plus people who are live streaming right now from their own devices. And it is the greatest thing we could ever ask for. From Afghanistan to Iran, the United States, across the widest oceans, the farthest plains, the speakers that you will hear from today are the most passionate, driven, honorary advocates of their revolution, of the world, of the revolution for women, and they are actually out there every day making a change, however small that may be. Today, we celebrate the life of the late Professor Hamida Barmaki, a woman who radiates light and power, a true pillar of her strength, a woman who put her entire heart of love into making this world a better place, a woman who is an advocate for all women across the world. Today, you will hear the words of the speakers speak, and I hope that you could take this as a moment to truly step out and make this world a better place, even with your own voice. There is hope, and there is good. And I really see that great things, incredible things, will begin to happen. So without further ado, we'd like to begin with our first speaker, and we will begin. Thank you.
Thank you all. Professor Dejani of our faculty.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Omar Dejani. I am a professor here at McGeorge School of Law, University of the Pacific, where I am also co-director of the Global Center. It is an extraordinary honor and pleasure for me to participate in this event, which is the product of the imagination and determination of our students and of the broader community here in McGeorge, a community that is linked to the struggles that we're going to be hearing about emotionally and intellectually and politically. And one of the things that we're especially proud of here at McGeorge, and our dean, Michael Hunter Schwartz, is here in the audience as well, and I know I speak on his behalf too in saying this, is that this institution and educational institutions more generally can be the interface through which struggles of this kind can be pursued transnationally, across borders, connecting people even as they undertake to liberate people. We have faced a difficult reminder here in the United States over the past year that progress toward freedom for women and the human rights of women is not linear. And indeed, that is true with respect to human rights in general. But the group assembled here and the speakers that we'll hear from today, and more than anything else, the extraordinary people whom we'll be honoring today, remind us that even if progress is not linear, that struggle is continuous, and each of us can be a part of that. And so with both humility and appreciation, I will return the podium to my wonderful JSD student, Fahim Barmaki, whom I'm also honored to work with this term, and wish everyone a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fahim Barmaki. I am brother to Professor Hamida Barmaki. And on behalf of the Barmaki family and Hoqoqmal family, I welcome you here today. I welcome you, and I thank McGeorge School of Law. I welcome people and thank people who have joined us on this Sunday at this important event. I'd also like to thank people who are joining us via the live stream broadcast, who are watching us right now. Thank you very much for sharing this moment with us. And finally, I'd like to thank our honored speakers who took time from different time zones to join us and to share their insights, some of whom will be speaking of their personal experiences related to both professors, both heroes today with us. With that, I want to mention that the agenda is very compressed, and I'm not going to go to the personal sides of their lives, my sister's life and what they have done, but I'll give you a brief, I'll let that part for the honored speakers to touch upon, but I'm going to give you a brief history of their formal life. And I hope that at this time today, like Mondi said, that we take something out of this gathering, and that it's not going to be just for today or tomorrow. Professor Barmaki was killed by the Taliban on January 28th, which was yesterday, of 2011 in Kabul in a suicide bombing attack. Herself, her husband, I'm sorry, this is not working. Okay. Her husband, Dr. Masood Yama, a surgeon, and 4 of her children, 3 of which you can see right now, the daughters, and in this, I'm so sorry. In this slide, you can see the son, and the son was about 2 years old when this incident happened, and not to mention everything, but only the son got 14 bullets in his body. This is a painting of Professor Hamida Barmaki that was done by artists in Kabul on International Women's Day, March 8th, and it was a symbol of freedom for women. Professor Hamida Barmaki spent all of her life educating others, advocating human rights, advocating women's rights, and for that matter, they died, all of them, although they had a lot of opportunities to live a restful life. The video that Mondis played a few minutes ago, you might have thought that that is something that's happening around the world, but it's not an accident. The fact that you see so much energy around, the fact that you see so many women around the world in Afghanistan, in Iran, and sympathizers in all over the world, in different forms in other countries like the United States, fighting inequality, fighting darkness, and trying to bring light is not an accident. It's because in each of these societies, Hamida Barmaki's and Professor Hoqoqmal's existed. They planted the seed of education, women's rights, human rights, peaceful living, democracy, and the like. I'd like to begin, this is doing its own thing. Yes, please. No, before this, please. This one. I'd like to bring up here one of the quotes from one of American law students who went to Afghanistan in 2010 on a rule of law project research, who met with Professor Barmaki in Kabul. And he wrote this in 2021 after the fall of Afghanistan. I'm going to read the bold area. He said, "The courageous ones have no guns, but speak the truth against the darkness. They have known this day may come when without friends and without protection, they would be left alone. They'd be left to face the darkness alone. Yet still, they have lived the truth. Those are our heroes." I want to point out that the sum of all, or the essence of today's gathering, can be summarized in this. There are many resistances, many types of resistances. Sometimes, or some of them might face guns in their face. Some of them in different forms. But those who are courageous to do this, especially in Afghanistan and in Iran, are facing execution, are facing bullets, but they still want to do this. Those are our heroes, and those are who can change the world, who can change Afghanistan, who can change our lives and the lives of our children for a better one. Professor Hamida Barmaki spent all of his life to illuminate tens of thousands, the hearts of tens of thousands of people, women around the world, and especially in Afghanistan. She advocated for women's rights and for bringing change in the society. She started really not from a big thing, but she saw a gap. She saw inequalities, and she dedicated her life to do something about it, which we can do, all of us can do. There's different capacities that she worked with, but I'm not going to go over each of them, but the key ones are that she was a professor of law at Kabul University Law School, the most prestigious law school in Afghanistan. And she was a high commissioner of the Independent Human Rights Commission of Afghanistan, and also she was national representative of Max Planck for Rule of Law Project. In the Rule of Law Project for Max Planck, she worked on modernization of the legal system in Afghanistan. Specifically, her work was with the Supreme Court of Afghanistan. Can you go to the next slide? She established, this is how you change the society depending on what you see. She established a master's program at the Kabul University Law School. She struggled a lot with it, given the ethnic tensions, given the bureaucracy, but she succeeded eventually. She had the idea of creation of a PhD program at the law school, which would take a longer time. And after her killing, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany founded a scholarship, a PhD scholarship in her name, which educated and brought professors from Afghanistan, different law schools, about 20 of them now. Some of them have finished, completed, and some are in the process of completion of their PhD in Germany to build the capacity. She founded an organization with which she educated tens of thousands of people, women in the most rural areas of Afghanistan. She created a legal clinic at Kabul University Law School to advance the number of female advocates, female attorneys. At that time in Afghanistan, becoming an attorney was not so much in the minds of the people who entered law school. It was something uncommon. She brought professors, people from the government and everywhere to give them a firsthand experience of how that is and how important it is to have female attorneys in the country and to advance the number of female attorneys. She also launched a women's education program through which professors and employees of the government, but all in the legal field, would go to the most rural areas of Afghanistan to teach women about their rights, about education, about how to access formal justice, how to identify crisis in life, including domestic violence, and so on. And through that, from 2009 up to 2011, she represented pro bono, for free, more than 3,000 cases. Some of them was domestic violence related. And she also was extremely interested in child's rights and child marriage. You might have heard of it in Afghanistan. And something that you've not heard about is child slavery in Afghanistan. She had an agreement with the UN to push the government to ban child abuse of any kind. And she would have signed it with the UN 2 days after her killing, but it passed later. So this brief introduction, I hope, and there's some publications that she has, including textbooks and articles, all in the field of law and women's rights advocacy and human rights. What I want you to take out of this is, again, the first message, that you can start somewhere, but you can fight inequality in any capacity. You can fight whether you're a man or a woman. You can ignite the light in the hearts of a lot of people around the world. And I believe today, Hamida Barmaki was not one. There are tens of thousands of Hamida Barmakis fighting inequality in Afghanistan, in Iran, and everywhere else, in different capacities and in different fields. Another one of our honored professors who was the probably first generation professors, female professors of Afghanistan, is Professor Mahboba Hoqoqmal. She also, like Professor Hamida Barmaki, left Afghanistan when the Taliban took over the first time, and they migrated to Pakistan, but they came back in 2001 and participated in creation of the government to make the society a better one for their children. And she was a fierce advocate of human rights and women's rights. She also, like Professor Barmaki, she has worked in different capacities, really high ranks, and most notably, she was a professor of law for 45 years at the law school, Kabul University. She was also the state minister of women's affairs and also a senator in the parliament. She also spent all of her life advocating for women's rights, and she died of old age. And she has selected publications, but we have not been able to retrieve everything properly. I apologize about it, and we're working on that. So given this, I hope that today what you see, what you hear from our honored guests, some of who will talk about their personal relations and how Professor Barmaki and Professor Mahboba Hoqoqmal influenced them, to show you that this light that's been turned on is going to go forever and will change the world. And I thank everyone who joins it, and I invite everyone to join it in their own capacity. And without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to our first honored speaker, Dr. Seema Samar, who worked as the former Minister of Women's Affairs in Afghanistan and many different high-ranking capacities, including the chairperson of the Independent Human Rights Commission of Afghanistan, and she had very well-established relations with both of these professors. Thank you all, and please, Dr. Seema Samar.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we do.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for organizing this program, and also thank you for giving me the time to speak about my personal relationship with Hamida Barmaki and also Mahboba Hoqoqmal. First of all, I would like to all of us to remember all the victims of human rights violation in Afghanistan and also in our neighboring country, Iran. And I ask everyone to have a minute of silence in order to respect these people's suffering and sacrifice. Thank you so much for joining me on this honor of the victims of violation of human rights. I think Fahim John already mentioned what Hamida did and achieved. I just want to shortly touch on our relationship and my personal relationship with Hamida John and the last is that we were. Hamida John was one of the commissioner of the Human Rights Commission, and she was responsible for the child rights. And of course, as she was also working at the commission as a commissioner, but she was also teaching at Kabul University, and also she was engaged in different issues and different other responsibilities, including working with Max Planck. And unfortunately, she died on the age of 41 with her 4 children and her husband in a suicide attack in a shop in Kabul in a bright light day. I was in Erbil in Iraq for a conference on the human rights and the constitution. When I called home, my family members said that I think your colleague has been killed in suicide attack today in Kabul, in the town. Then I called some of the executive director of the Human Rights Commission. I said, what's happening? And he called that, yes, unfortunately, Hamida John and her husband and 4 children died when they were in a shop called Finest in the middle of the Wazir Akbar Khan, which we called green zone of Kabul. It was very difficult to understand because I mean, yes, they said that they were in the shop, but nobody knew the actual detail of what's happening and who was the target. And they were already, the group who committed this crime already accepted that they have committed this crime and they were attacking Blackwater, someone. But I mean, how can they attack a public place because of one person? And I'm not sure if somebody from Blackwater was killed or not. But anyway, it was really difficult to understand. And for me, it was so difficult because I was far away and I was in Erbil and I didn't know what to do. Of course, I couldn't sleep that night. And then when I came back to Kabul, the only thing that we could do, actually, we could not really do a lot to honor her sacrifice, to honor her work in relation to human rights and the promotion of democracy in Afghanistan. But what we did, we had a resource center in a library. That the first thing that we decided among the commissioners, we also have Nader Nadri here, who was a commissioner on that time in the commission. We decided to at least to name our resource center in our library on behalf of Hamida Barmaki. And then, of course, I was also in contact with the colleague. I think Tilman is already with us in this program. That what we can do for Hamida Barmaki, and we decided that we would like to have a minaret on her name, on behalf of her, and the sacrifice of the whole family, in front of that shop in the middle of the city. I went to see the president several times in this regard, but unfortunately, because of a patriarchy system, because of male domination in Afghanistan, because Barmaki was not a daughter or a wife of any warlord, so nobody really paid attention. And I really worked hard, and we were taking the responsibility, and Tilman is here and he can speak also. We were both decided that we can contribute somehow in order to make a minaret on her behalf, because she went to the shop in order to, I think, to do some shopping, as I heard that it was her second daughter's birthday that day. And all of them died. As Fahim said, I haven't been there, so I didn't see, unfortunately, or fortunately, their bodies. But even that small baby carried 14 or 15 bullets in his body. Then you can imagine the whole family was. It's so difficult to imagine, and particularly for Mahboba Hoqoqmal, who was her mother-in-law, to receive 6 bodies in one day, the entire family. Her husband also worked with the commission briefly. I remember when Dr. Yama joined the commission, there was a case in 2003 in Bala Murghab, in one of the districts in Badghis. There was a fight between the two armed group, and we sent Yama for investigation. Although he didn't have a lot of experience, none of us, we didn't have experience on investigation of violation of human rights. And he went to that place, which is quite remote part of the Badghis. And then he collected all the evidence and he came back with the report. And when he was reporting back to me, I realized that how committed he is and how impartially and honestly he looked at these issues. It was like fighting between the two groups. And I remember that women in the village were afraid that they will be caught by one of these armed groups, by one of these men, in fear of the sexual violence or rape. They ran to the river, and they were all drowned. It was spring of 2003 when the water level was high in that area. But he worked briefly with us, and then he joined the other governmental program in different parts. I remember before going to this trip myself, when Hamida Jan asked me she asked me for a meeting, and then she came and she said that I would like to go and get my PhD from Germany, and Max Planck is willing to give the scholarship. But unfortunately, the embassies told her that they are not going to give a visa to all of them, a member of the family, to her children, actually. And what would I do? What can I do? Or what is my advice? I told her, I said, nobody else can decide and know your life much better than yourself. But if you want me, I can interfere and I can go and see the ambassador and ask for the visa. And she said, that's okay. It's not a bad idea. Let me think we still have some time. And she had a plan to go with her children. She said, we are planning to go to India for a short time. And then when I come back and you come back, then we can decide about all these. Unfortunately, when I came back, Hamida was not there. People who knew her, people who were her student, they could not really forget Hamida's responsibility, Hamida's passion, Hamida's commitment to promotion and protection of human rights, and particularly for promotion of equality and gender equality in a country like Afghanistan. I mean, you hear these days the stories from Afghanistan, that what is going on. We are unfortunately facing with a group of people who do not believe on human dignity and inequality between men and women, particularly women. For them, is the current regime think that the women are their enemies, and nothing except to try to control women in Afghanistan. And we in the Human Rights Commission, and her room was just beside my room in the office. And we were not able to look at the door or open the office for almost 6 months. We couldn't open the room. It was really difficult for us. I mean, every minute I was seeing Hamida with her smiling face, because we were seeing each other every minute, or every 10 minutes or 15 minutes. We were so close to each other. And when we opened the room, the irony was that a lot of her personal document were in the office. And her computer was open. Her book, because she was writing a book on that time, I don't remember the name of the book now, but everything, her pen was open and everything was there. And I remember that day that I told colleagues that open the door and collect all of her personal items and call her family, the father or the brother, to give her personal item to them. But I don't want to see, and I cannot see it. And believe me that I was not able to enter to the room for so long. Even when we needed the room to be used by some other colleague. Every time Hamida and Hamida's photo was appeared. But what is sad is that nobody really promote justice for Hamida. I mean, we tried a lot from the commission side, but we couldn't do anything. And the people who committed this crime, this war crimes, and crimes could be crimes against humanity also, because they attacked the civilian area, and these people were just victims of the aggression and violence by the group who are unfortunately now in power in Afghanistan. Was no accountability and no justice. And they still sit in the television. I mean, before the collapse of the government, when I was still in Kabul, they were sitting in the television for an interview, and they were defending their act. And they were proudly saying that it was part of their mission and part of jihad. And you can see how much these people are using religion as a tool of war, as a weapon of war in order to impose their mentality and their opinions on people. And they can kill anyone, anywhere, without even admitting, without even really thinking that they committed a crime in the scene. So what I would like to say at the end, I mean, Mahboba Jan Hoqoqmal, as Fahim Jan already said, I think when I saw her biography again, I mean, she graduated in 1965 from Kabul University. Colleagues, friends, it was 1965 when a woman graduated from law in Kabul University. And today, maybe the third generation is not able to go to university. I mean, she was a good example for all of us and a quite good friend of all of us. And I think it was maybe 2.5 years ago, just before few months before she passed away. Me and one of my colleagues, we went to see Mahboba Jan, and she was, of course, she was old and quite old. And that was our last time that we spoke and talked, and we were planning actually. And that was my personal plan that we, because we built the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission building in Kabul, and we had an auditorium, and I wanted that auditorium to be named on behalf of Hamida Barmaki. And I spoke with Mahboba Jan. I said, but I will invite you, and you have to come and speak on that occasion. But unfortunately, we couldn't even do that because then there were a lot of other issues that we were involved in. Then I was not at the commission anymore to fulfill that part. And I regret that I should have acted quicker. Although the Human Rights Commission is abolished, I don't know, they were not allowing. As Fahim said, that her photo was painted by the artist near to the commission. And it was a protest, or not protest, it was actually a resistance by the group who committed the crime on that time to remove her from that street. It was just on the wall of the American University in Afghanistan. So I think what we who believe on equality, who believe on human rights, who believe on promotion, on human dignity, we all need to fight for justice, because access to justice and accountability and ending culture of impunity in Afghanistan will help the other countries. Remember that all these fundamentalists and armed groups and dictators, they learn from each other. And they are coming quite together, although we as human rights defenders who believe on human right values and principles, we are not united as we should. So I would call on everyone to do a few things. One, keep Afghanistan in the agenda, not Afghanistan, but also the other countries who are violation of human rights are going on. Two, human rights is not Western values. It's a human value no matter where we are. Three, injustice in Afghanistan or in Iran or in Sudan or Somalia, wherever you think, is injustice everywhere. Four, I think with continuation of lack of accountability, injustice, we fuel the culture of impunity. Everybody can commit any kind of crimes anywhere without being kept accountable. Fifth, I think, as we know that the judiciary system in the courts in our country, in our region, I would say, is not independent. It's not impartial. It's not capable to deal with the war crimes and crimes against humanity or international crimes. We need to support the international mechanism for accountability and justice. In current situation, we don't have any other option, any other mechanism, but it's ICC that we can and we should promote in order to end the culture of impunity. Once again, thank you so much. I don't know how focused I was, because it was difficult for me to talk about this issue and not getting emotional. But thank you very much for including me in this program. And we need to remember our heroes who sacrificed for the rights of others, including Hamida Barmaki. And thank you so much.
Dr. Seema Samar, former Minister of Women's Affairs and Chairperson of the Independent Human Rights Commission of Afghanistan, thank you very much. At this point, I just want to mention that there's some refreshments and food in the hallway. Please do use it, it's for you. And also for our honored speakers to be a little mindful of the timing as it's getting more compressed. At this point, I'm going to ask Nadir Nadiri, former chairman of the Independent Administrative Reform and Civil Services Commission of Afghanistan, to share some words with us. Thank you. Nadir Nadiri.
Thank you, Fahimjan. Good morning or good afternoon for those of audience in different corners of the world. It is an honor to speak about two of the heroes, as Dr. Samar said. I had the privilege to be student to both of the professors. My first year as a law student, I was taught letters of law by Professor Mahboba Hoqoqmal, and later on, a year after, again by Professor Barmaki, who just joined as a professor at Harvard Law School, and I had the privilege to be taught by them the first letters of law. But also, I had the pleasure of being colleagues with both of them in different times. In 2002, when the Emergency Lawyers Commission, the traditional Grand Assembly, the commission was responsible and mandated to convene and prepare for the convening of the Grand Assembly. Mahboba Hoqoqmal was the deputy chairperson of the commission. As the most authoritative female leader at the time, who had not only the knowledge of the law, but also have lived through very difficult and good times, through the difficult and different political upheaval. He was well versed on society of Afghanistan and of its politics. She was a strong and a voice of for not only women but for Afghans who believed in a democratic, free, and open society at the commission and outside. And I share one anecdote or experience. A day where the members of the Emergency Lawyers Commission, different corners of Afghanistan, to speak to the ordinary Afghans, to do the outreach on this new political practice where the people of the long time will be part of a process where they would decide about the future leader, through a mix of traditional processes and the modern ballot and voting. And it happened that Professor Hoqoqmal would go to one of the remote areas of Maidan Wardak, where it was some violence activities were happening there. I told her, Professor, that place is far, but also it requires a lot of walking, this, and you will be not comfortable going there. And she looked at me and said, Nader, you tell me not to go to that location, to tell the people just by being there that we do exist. The Afghan women do exist. We are not brought by the West. The women rights and women leadership and women participation in Afghan society is not brought by the West. We were here in very long past, as Dr. Somerset or Fahim John explained, and we gonna demand by being there an equal right. Her courage, her wisdom, and her vision of a different type of demanding for equality through demonstrating that we take equal burden of some of the national responsibility was always an example for me. Not only that moment, but throughout 6 months of very difficult work that we have had together, we tried to chart a new path for Afghanistan, and she was at the forefront then. With Hamida Barmaki, I'm at the commissions of the Human Rights Commission. We were set together, close to each other at the lunch table. Her commitment to human rights and to law was not just a professional commitment. It was a personal commitment. It was passionate. She carried it with a lot of passion. Her belief on human rights was rooted to her, not only to her education, but also to her experience and understanding that transformation of a society cannot be done unless you pursue it wholeheartedly. And she pursued it wholeheartedly. The discussions we have had most of the time surrounded around the notion of rule of law and how autocratic or dictators or regimes cannot abuse rights of population if there are mechanisms of enforceability for rights and for the law. The rule of law she believed in was always a rule of law through a process where there will be public's input to it, where informed parliament and parliamentarians will have involvement and adoption of it, not the law issued by the authorities or those in power. So what she left on that day, that tragic day where that terrorist act of taking her and her family from us, her legacy is work with commitment and passion for change, work selflessly, and then there's no other way to ensure rights and freedom unless it is enforced by rule of law and unless those laws are adopted through a process where people have a say in it. A society without protection of freedoms, without safeguards for those rights, she would always raise it as a major concern, and she would point to Afghan children that that society will be judged because of the way that their children are being treated, because we didn't put the right kind of guarantees for protection of these children. So that's her legacy, a legacy of commitment, a legacy of passion for human rights and of rule of law, and institutional legacy in form of the lawyers and judges training center at Kabul University, and through many thousands of students that left today and carry her passion with them. Now, tragically, that day when she was taken from us, I was one of those first that were informed. I rushed to both to hospital and also later to the site of the incident. I believe very firmly that she was targeted. It was not an accident that somebody else was targeted. It was a terrorist act against her because it happened at the middle or close to her that took all of her family first. There were other casualties, yes, but she was the target. Her belief was the target. A strong woman with a strong belief in rule of law and rights and freedom was a symbol that the Taliban or any other terrorist group or any other uh, 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 group that would believe in closed societies would target and would see her as an enemy, and that's why I believe she was targeted, and it was a targeted attack. Uh, Unfortunately, as Dr. Summer said, the impunity persists. We were not able to bring the perpetrators of that act to justice. The group that claimed responsibility immediately, but it was a practice that extended throughout the Taliban's behavior against women leaders, and against any symbol of a free Afghan society, uh, uh, continued to live with protection in Kabul later on, when under the peace banner they did come. And as a peace negotiator, when later on I was negotiating with the Taliban, I would see them at the other side of the table talking to us and to me and to the rest of our peace negotiator team that they had no regret in doing so. So the message here and the lesson here is that our international system of enforceability against crimes against humanity and war crime is weak. The ICC is an institution, one of the last hopes around, but even the ICC hasn't been able and does not have the right tools of enforceability to hold people and groups with these grave crimes in their baggage and in their hand. So I would leave with this last message that the fight for justice would continue. There will be more victims as we move on to demand justice in Afghanistan and across the globe. Unless we work academia, like yourself, sitting at the university there, and also practitioners, if we don't join hand and be pragmatist in finding ways to address the issue of enforceability of international laws, the notion of impunity will continue to take life and will continue to suppress society, and we will remain an important tool to the hands of tyrant governments and brutal groups like the Taliban today in Afghanistan. I thank you for gathering, for commemorating Hamida Barmaki and Mahboba Hoqoqmal. Thank you.
Thank you. We thank Nadir Nadiri, former chairman of the Independent Administrative Reform and Civil Services Commission of Afghanistan. We have one more speaker at this time, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. We ask Dr. Tilman Roeder, who is joining us from Germany, Director of Institute for Law and Society in Afghanistan, to share some words with us. Dr. Tilman.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well and you can see me. Thank you for having me tonight. It's evening in Germany, by the way. I'm very glad that we can again speak about Hamida, about Mahboba, about so important friends and people I learned from so much in my life. They were facing a lot of resistance and difficulties. And I want to mention two situations where they couldn't reach goals that they wanted to reach. And I want to explain what I believe was the problem. The one was the mentioned master's program at Kabul University. Hamida and I had this idea to establish the first LLM program at Kabul University. But there was a group of professors that should coordinate this at the university, at the law faculty, and they started demanding money. So we were very unhappy with that, because our donors said we need a clear commitment from the university, and it's not them getting money, but they should invest what they can, time, whatever. But they continued with that, stopped meeting, and had a very clear opinion that this was money for sitting together and talking about a fantastic new program for the students. It ended with no program at all. It was stopped from our side because we understood that they will never give up and they would want money for whatever they did. It could not be started, launched, and sustainable. Hamida and I had a very clear common understanding and opinion about that. That was disappointing. And we also saw here groups of like networks of men who used faculty, who used their power positions to make personal profit. It was all men, by the way. The second situation was when Hamida John had passed away, and there was this organization named after her. And there were certain problems, including harassment of women and others at that organization. And Mahboba tried to help. She brought together the respected elders and to resolve that. But it was not possible. I'll not go into details here, but it was not possible to get to a result that would be acceptable to those persons, men in that organization, who were committing those deeds. In both cases, they ran against a wall, and that was a wall built by the interests of men that they were faced with and that they could not overcome. I understood in all those many years, in those situations when things did not work out, I understood so much more about the situation of women in Afghanistan. I learned so much about that in those years, in those talks. When I started working with Hamida Barmaki in an office of a German organization, and that was the gender office of GIZ. I took a picture of her there, by the way. This is the picture. I took this photo, which later art lords used for different ways to commemorate her. And in that project, I didn't understand, that office, I didn't understand what is the relation between rule of law and gender? What is the nexus between all that? Hamida taught me. Mahboba explained me. I learned from Sima Sama and many others. Today, I think that the core of the problems of very many problems of Afghanistan are the patriarchal system, and I think that the country will only change if men will change their attitude in that country. This is not true for all men, of course, for very, very many, and these structures make it just impossible for women to live, work, even to breathe. There are some other examples. There's a young woman I very much admire. She was 18 years old when Kabul was taken over by the Taliban. Her name is Lamar, and she writes columns in a German journal. She gives interviews. She was in a podcast with Hillary Clinton. She did all that out of zero. I'm so impressed by that. She is an activist, an educator, teaching young women and girls, trying to replace the school that they can attend in online formats. There are these people still that we have to support, that we can, that give us hope, that something can still change in that country. But in general, as we all see and know, the situation is dramatic. Very many women are falling into poverty, bad poverty, because they cannot work anymore, they cannot have an income anymore. Altogether, there's even little chance for people who are hungry and poor and who don't have anything to live from to do any resistance against the current regime. I'm myself also involved in supporting Afghans who are out of the country. We have happily a large new program in Germany supporting them. And I'm trying to draw from inside the focus on women to support them, because many of them get very depressed and they don't see any future for their lives, which I can understand. At the same time, I'm very, very sad doing that because it's such a loss for the country. These people who have been educated in the last years and decades, who are so valuable, all go to Germany and to many other countries in the world. This is it's a big brain drain and a loss of culture and knowledge for the country, as we all know. But we cannot leave them behind. We have to do what we can to save at least their lives and give them a chance to continue with their lives. So I'm still very much involved with Afghanistan. It feels, I would say, 90% of my work and my life in very many different ways. But it's fine. I love that country very much, and I like to do that. For an outlook, what is also needed? ILSAF has been mentioned, the Institute for Law and Society in Afghanistan. We formed that to keep the knowledge of law alive, to keep some research on Afghanistan, even a little bit in Afghanistan, alive to us. And I hope that some people will join us here because we have to continue preparing for better times. And secondly, something that's reflecting a lot as a father of a small kid, a boy. How can I raise this boy to be a good boy, to be good with women, a good member in society? And I think it is something that everyone, including Afghan families, should think about. The revolution that we need is also something that must start in our homes, in our private lives. We have to ensure that the attitudes of men in Afghanistan, of many men, not all, as I said, many men change, that they behave differently in society, that the power relations between men and women, between majorities and minorities, between different faith groups change. I think that is something we can start at home, even if we can't change so much in the country at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tillman, for the insights and kind words that you shared with us. At this juncture, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Please use the refreshments and some food that is prepared in the hallway, and we'll be back in 10 minutes with another group of Iranian fierce women to share their insights. Thank you.
You all, dear guests, we will begin again. It is now my great honor and privilege to welcome the following three guests. Gizu Nia, she is the Director of Strategic Litigation Project at the Atlantic Council, and she is also one of the leaders of the Iranian Revolution right now, and the work that she is doing is absolutely phenomenal. We also have the greatest honor and privilege to introduce brand new elected mayor of West Hollywood, Mayor Seppi Shine, who is an incredible advocate, a model, a true model of resilience and dedication to the revolution, the Iranian movement. She is the first LGBTQ plus woman, Iranian woman, in a council position such as hers in the entire world. And I want to emphasize the weight of what it is to be a woman, what it is to be an Iranian woman, and to also hold that title within the LGBTQ community, and how incredible it is and how resilient it is. We also have our moderator here, Shali Zomoradi, and she is an incredibly successful morning news anchor in San Diego, and we are so grateful to have each of them. So I will let Shali and the rest of them take it away. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if my video is up. Can everybody see me?
No.
Okay. Well, for some reason, my video is deciding not to work. Let me this. There. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It is so good to be here. Reintroduce myself for a moment because I caught the tail end of that, and introduce our incredible guests that we have here today on this panel. My name is Shali Zamarodi, and I anchor the morning news at Fox 5 San Diego. It is my honor to be here today on behalf of the Iranian American Women Foundation, an organization that I am so incredibly involved with. Very proud of everything that they do for Iranian American women, both here and around the world. So we have two panelists here today. So proud of both of these women, and you'll see why in a minute, because I'm going to just take a moment to introduce them and read their bios, and then we're going to get into this and talk about something that is so on our minds and our. So at first, I'd like to introduce you and welcome to Gisu Nia. She's a human rights lawyer and the director of the Strategic Litigation Project at the Atlantic Council. The Strategic Litigation Project works on prevention and accountability efforts for crimes, human rights violations, terrorism, corruption, offenses around the world. She serves as a board chair on the Iran Human Rights Documentation Center, where she is helping, and I've been watching her help do this, develop and oversee the group's human rights advocacy and legal programs, which seek to promote accountability and respect for human rights and the rule of law in Iran. Nia started her career earlier on, where she worked on war crimes and crimes against humanity trials at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the International Criminal Court. And she also lectures and publishes widely on global human rights developments, as well as the rule of law in post-conflict and transitional societies. I basically think she's incredibly smart and all kinds of things. And I've been in awe of her and everything that she's been doing over the past few months. So welcome to Gisu. Our next panelist that I want to welcome. First, I want to give a big round of applause for. When I saw this, I was like, yes, 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 this is incredible. Mayor Shine, mayor of West Hollywood, Seppi Shine. Mayor Shine is the first Iranian female mayor in the state of California and the first out LGBTQ Iranian mayor in the world. Mayor Shine made history in November of 2020 when she was elected to the West Hollywood City Council. I love it when we can say she is the first. She is the first. She is the first woman of color elected to the West Hollywood City Council, and her election ushered in West Hollywood's first female majority city council. Mayor Shine's priorities include advocating for affordable housing, protecting renters, social service programs, social justice, small business revival, and bringing. And thank you for being here. Gisu,
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Hi. Gisu,
Hi.
I'm going to start with you. I think everybody at this point, if you don't have a basic understanding of what's happening in Iran right now, you just haven't been watching the news, because it's definitely grown, and all eyes are on Iran and what's been happening over the past 5 months. Bring us up to date, and if you could give us a synopsis of just where we're at right now with what we can now say a revolution in Iran.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for introducing us, and really glad to be here. I'm sure a lot of people in the crowd are aware of what triggered these protests in mid-September, the tragic death of MESAA Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman who died in the custody of Iran's so-called morality police. But where we are today is that the protests are ongoing. So there has been a bit of a quieting for many months. There were, regular, very robust protests, which, to keep in mind, it's not like when people go out on the street here to protest, where there is, there may be attempts at crowd control, or things that happen in terms of skirmishes and scuffles, and sometimes people getting injured, but there it's a capital offense, so it's really important to remember that when we see crowds in the street, and crowds are bigger on some days and smaller on some days, the point is that all these people are quite literally risking their lives, either through the lethal force that's applied by Iran's state security forces, or later if they are arrested and then face execution. So it's not insignificant that the protests have gone on this long. Right now, it's very cold in Iran. So it's one reason why we don't see as many people on the streets. It's actually just a practical, logistical reason. And part of it, in the conversations that I've had with a lot of young people in the country and the people that regularly engage with them, the sort of like citizen journalist collectives that collect information and these videos that you see online, they're also a little bit fatigued, because it's been going on for, we're in the 5th month. And there are about 100 people who are facing charges that carry execution. So at the moment, they're not necessarily sentenced to execution and on death row, but they could potentially face capital charges. These are people who have just participated in protests and been arrested. So these are not people who've been accused of or convicted of any type of offense where death penalty would actually be all right, and where there would be an exception under international law. It's absolutely not okay. There are about 20,000 protesters and those linked to protests that have been arrested since mid-September. Many of them continue to remain in detention. They're facing custodial torture, and there are reports of when people are released of them mysteriously dying. There's been different reports saying that these people are allegedly, the state is alleging that they've committed suicide, but it's pretty clear that that's not the case and that they have undergone really serious torture while in custody. So that's where we are right now. But the point is that even if there's a bit of a lull in the numbers of people on the streets today, that doesn't mean that the dissent isn't continuing. And because there's been such a clear statement against the Islamic Republic that is unlikely to be bottled up and go away. I think we've kind of gone to a point, not a point of no return exactly, but it would be very difficult to see how the status quo would be upheld at this stage.
I want to talk a little bit about the protests if we can, and then Mayor Shine, I want to bring you in. The other day, I was in the Los Angeles area, one of the protests that they were having up there, and I was posting a story, and my aunt, who lives in Iran, sent me a message and said, Shali, you know, if you did this in Iran, you would be arrested for what you're about to do. And I felt so proud that I can be in a country and be in a city where I can walk and peacefully protest. And I know that the police is there to protect me. The city is there to protect me. And I can share my feelings and my beliefs. As far as the way cities here, because we've seen them from Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, cities all over the United States supporting the Iranian Americans here, how does that work for you as someone who is a mayor now? You're very passionate about what's happening in Iran, to be able to support the voices of constituents here.
Thank you for that question, and I'm so honored to be on this panel, very honored to be a panelist with Yisu, and thank you for moderating. There's several ways that cities and local elected officials and elected officials across all levels can support our Iranian family in Iran, as well as here to provide Iranian Americans with a feeling that we are with our Iranian Americans as elected officials, and it's actually really important to do so. So in the city of West Hollywood, I was one of the first elected officials to do an adjournment for MESAA Gina Amini, and I posted it on my social media, and it got 85,000 views and shares, and so vocalizing what's happening is essential. From the dais, with colleagues, making sure this stays not only what we've been asking for everyone else to do, to share on social media, but as elected officials, we are in a different place of power that we can actually affect change on all levels. Even local officials can affect change by various ways. Other ways that I personally, what I've been doing, and I know my Iranian American sister from another mother, Sharona Nazarian from Beverly Hills City Council, has also been speaking at each council meeting. We keep giving updates to our residents, and that's online, so that's helpful too. But the Iranian American Women's Foundation reached out to us, and they wanted to organize a vigil, and we did that in the city of West Hollywood. So I encourage local leaders, if you get organizations reaching out to you, or even reach out to organizations and say, we want our city to very loudly be on the side of justice. There's also resolutions that can be passed, and I passed 2 of them already in the city of West Hollywood, standing with the peaceful protesters and asking for sanctions. And those resolutions have been sent to regional, state, and federal leaders. So.
I remember in a city that was here in Southern California, some people commenting and saying, well, this doesn't concern us, so why should this be a city issue? This is not something that's happening here. What would the response be to other constituents that may not understand the importance of what's happening?
Sure, I would say the first thing is that Iranian Americans live everywhere. So as long as we have any constituency that is Iranian American, this is important because all of us here are being affected by what's happening in Iran. But on a larger level, what's happening in Iran is really a mirror, unfortunately, of the fascism that is happening in America. And if we as leaders don't stand up against human rights violations across the board, then you'll be next, in other words. So this does affect everybody.
You talk about these human rights violations, Gisu, the horrific news of these executions, picture after picture, the violence, the rape, the arrests, the imprisonment of thousands and thousands of people. Like, I've lost track. I can't even keep track anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the one point that the mayor just made right now that's really important and also relates to why we should care is that and it relates to the fact that these executions are occurring, is that the officials of the Islamic Republic have used a globalized system to keep themselves afloat. So they store their assets, their personal assets, in the US, believe it or not. You would think that because of targeted human rights sanctions and the range of other sanctions that the US government has put on the Islamic Republic, you would think that officials aligned with the government wouldn't have houses here, but they do. And we've dug up the titles and the deeds, right? So they have used different, and it's not only the US, it's a lot worse in Canada, Germany, the UK, France, the Netherlands. So they use these systems to be able to store their assets and enrich themselves, and their children live, work, and study in these countries, while the people of Iran face inflation, corruption, and a mismanaged system. So those that have the resources that are connected to the government and are extremely corrupt, and who have obtained those resources on the back of human rights violations, because the human rights violations and the executions are meant to repress the population and keep the system of corruption going. So a lot of people think that the reason that the Islamic Republic does what it does is purely ideology, that they are, continuing to uphold this revolutionary ideology. But it's much more a system of kleptocracy, actually. It's much more a system that thrives on corruption. And if you look at the lifestyles of the children of these supposedly pious regime officials, you'd be very surprised to see all the drinking of alcohol, all the nudity, all the, which is like, that's all well and good. But if you are preaching religion and saying that everybody in the country needs to adopt to a very strict form of what they view as Islam, then having your children behave in such a way is quite curious, right? So it's really not about ideology at some point. It's really about the corruption and the fact that they're very much enriching themselves. So they're able to do that and continue this system of execution, repression, and human rights violations by utilizing the global financial system and all the loopholes. Now, it might not be on the extent that, for example, Russian oligarchs are, engaging with different Western countries that Putin then sort of denounces, but it's still rather significant. So that's actually why it does matter to all of us, even if it's not about our Iranian American constituents. Everybody is actually somehow supporting this system through the laws that we have and the fact that it's not being cracked down on. So it's actually a global issue and should concern everybody.
I don't think Mayor Shine in my entire life. I was born and raised here in the United States. The last time I went back to Iran, I was just 4 years old. I've never lived there, but the support that I've seen from the community globally grow over the past few months when we saw an American singer or celebrity holding up an Iranian flag or wearing a shirt has been incredible. And as the community is screaming, help, we need help, we need help, it's really these moments that the government, whether local, different countries are stepping in. And is this where the change is going to happen? Or for those that may say, okay, we're just going out and protesting and nothing is going to change and nothing is going to happen, do you agree with that statement? Or are things changing because of governments and the way governments in different countries are stepping in right now?
I think there's definitely a change in this, what started as peaceful protest and now revolution. And by the way, I can definitely relate to your feeling. And something that I want to address is the change that is happening internally for all of us that we're part of the diaspora is so healing, and all of this trauma is coming to the surface to be dealt with. Just on a community change, I had never seen so many of my family members be actively involved in shifting the way they are now speaking up and speaking to their neighbors and going to protest. That is a consciousness shift. And whenever there is a shift like that, there's no stopping that. Now, on a policy level, people are in different countries making some changes, but we need to keep doing more. And we can't stop. We need to be relentless in continuing to protest here, even though winter has come and the protests in Iran have slowed down just because of the cold. For them to know that we are continuing, will continue to give the courage to Iranians back home to continue fighting and fighting. And I do believe, actually, I absolutely believe this is the last stand of this regime. So we need to keep going and not let any of the, the cynics that might say, well, I don't know. And I don't know with marriage equality, what I would compare this to, which is different, but so many people before we had marriage equality for LGBTQ folks said, it's going to take another 100 years, 50 years. I don't know if anything's going to change. Well, with that level of thinking, nothing will change. Action creates change. So, and that's what we did with marriage equality. Very different than this, but I've seen huge shifts in so many ways, and we just need to continue taking action.
You talk about those protests, there's a big one coming to your neck of the woods, February 11th, a huge one. Yes. It's not in West Hollywood, but it's coming to Los Angeles, where I know that there's going to be thousands upon thousands of people there, because people in diaspora are not done with this. And I don't think they're going to stop until it's done. Gi Soo-Jun, action, action, action. When you were working with getting the Islamic Republic of Iran, the commission off the status of women, to get them off of that. I remember during that time, people sending messages to me saying, that's not going to do anything. Just, okay, they removed. First, I don't even know how they got on there, but that's a whole nother panel. But what are moves like that, when you make moves like that, when Europe and the effort to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization, what does that mean?
So the effort to kick the Islamic Republic off the UN Commission on the Status of Women was actually something that women leaders inside Iran asked us to do. So that wasn't always clear in the narrative, I think, because there was a lot of people talking about it and they didn't necessarily know where it originated from. So anything that they ask us to do, we're going to do. And so in terms of the significance of that, I mean, it was just it's more of a political signal than anything, because they shouldn't have been on the commission in the first place, but they were also using it as a platform. The Islamic Republic was using it as a platform to spread their version of women's rights. So their version of women's rights is not in line with universal human rights. It thinks that women only belong in the home, in the domestic sphere. Surely if a woman wants to choose to do that, that's her choice, but they've essentially decided that there is no choice and that that's the only thing that they should be doing. They're very proud of that. And so it doesn't only have an impact on Iran. It has an impact because they were using the platform to say that that's actually a cultural relativist version of women's rights and that they're actually very supportive of women's rights. And that affects other countries. We may think that's, you know, a silly argument to our ears, but it has a lot of weight actually around the world. And there's a lot of men and also a lot of women who would be happy to say that that is where women should be. So they were doing quite a lot of harm by being there. But in terms of getting the IRGC designated or things like that, I've read a lot of commentary about how none of these moves matter. But I also think that some of the people who are saying that are not aware of the legal framework under which the IRGC designation, a terrorist designation in Europe, would actually give rise to multiple ways in which assets linked to the Revolutionary Guard would be seized and repurposed and used for victims and survivors of their abuses. I think they're just not familiar with the legal framework. And so to them, I read a bunch of, you know, commentary from people who say that they're Iran analysts saying that, you know, it's just a symbolic move. But I just think that they're not really aware of what weight a designation like that carries. It's similar to something that we have here in the US that for in the beginning, it was sort of criticized as it's going to lead to, you know, World War III in the Middle East, and also there's no point to it. But that's just not true. There's a reason that the designation carries a certain weight. There's also a reason that they haven't been designated yet, because it actually has to go through either a court process, there has to be an investigation that is instigated, or a trial on this question. And so there's actually a legal process that has to go through for this to even happen. It will not happen just because people are protesting and saying it should happen. That certainly helps motivate lawmakers to pass resolutions in support of it and to take the kind of action that's needed to be taken, but it actually goes through a legal process. So a lot of these actions have either a political impact or they have a legal significance that matters when it comes to cracking down on Islamic Republic officials that have millions of dollars stored outside of Iran. A lot of this are in shadow accounts that is not that easy to trace, but some of it is a lot more in plain sight. And I know it sounds, you know, very hard to believe, but these assets are being stored outside of the country, and a big part to changing, or at least convincing parts of the regime potentially to defect, it's really all about the money. This actually ties into a much bigger strategy to try to encourage change in the human rights situation and in the political situation.
Hello, I think that there might be a technical difficulty. Shally, are you here?
Yeah, I lost Gisu. Can you hear me?
Gisu, we can hear you.
I'm here. Do you hear?
Might be cutting out.
You can hear. Can you hear me? It's Shally.
Oh, there we go. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I caught the tail end of that, and then the connection kind of stopped. Are we all back? Can you hear everybody?
Yes, you're good.
We can hear you.
Okay. Gisu, thank you for that. And I got most of it and until the very end. If I can, I want to go to Mayor Shine for a moment I know today's panel or the whole event, it said it's not a moment, it's a revolution. And you use the term revolution. Still in mainstream media, I don't see this term used widely across the board. Are you comfortable calling it a revolution now? And why do you think this isn't a word that is solidly used?
I've been calling this a revolution for quite a while now. And it's not a word that's being used because mainstream media is just not covering this as much. And so every time I am interviewed, I keep saying revolution so that it catches on. And as the activists out there that are on our side and the Iranian American diaspora and everybody else who is, Iranian or related to Iran or lived in Iran is here now, we all need to call this a revolution because that's exactly what it is. This isn't just, it may have started because of the murder of MESAA, but because of not wearing her headscarf properly, but it has now become a call for the a secular democratic Iran across the board and the end to this Islamic regime and their brutal reign for over 40 years. So that's a revolution.
Mayor Shine, in the past few months, I can't tell you how many messages people send. Shali, why isn't the U.S. doing anything? Why isn't anybody? I mean, I don't know the answer. I'm not part of the United States government and politics and politicians and those who are in charge of policy. How could the U.S. help? How could the U.S. help?
I think there are many ways, and Guy Sujan can probably speak more to the legal ways, but as elected officials and our president, even leaning on media, changing the way they speak about this too, more targeted sanctions. They did some sanctions in the resolution that I had passed. The last one was to the part about designating them as a terrorists organization. That was part of it, but another part was when we were talking about their family members, having their family members, organizations, associations, anyone that is here connected to them, having their assets frozen and deported. That's another way they can help. Looking at how policies that can empower the Iranian people across the board, but also partnering up with different countries that would benefit from this Islamic regime and ending this terrorism, creating a united front with the European allies and Israel and all of the powers in the world collectively meeting and discussing how to, in a peaceful way. I'm not a proponent of war. I've never thought the US going to war has actually ever left anything better in the Middle East. But there are other ways, and world leaders need to meet and have those discussions. So those are just some of the ways the US can help.
I know we're getting towards the end of our time on our panel. So first I want to thank Mayor Shine and Gisu, both of you, for being a part of today. I'm so incredibly proud of both of your work. I've been watching both of you over the past few months, and I know that the community is thankful to have women like you in the positions that you are in and making change. With that said, with the last few minutes, I know that they have people there, and we want to give them an option that if they have any questions that they would like to ask Gisu or Mayor Shine, we can use these last few moments to be able to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. And at this time, thank you so much, Shali. And at this time, from the audience, if there's anything in particular from this conversation of panelists that has incited anything within you, if we have any questions in the audience that the panelists can answer regarding Iran, the situation in Iran, what is happening, what it means to be an Iranian American right now. I know, as the other panelists have spoken as well, to the fact that being an Iranian American is not so far removed from being an Iranian born there. We carry the same weight, the same burden, and all the love for this revolution is still equally on our shoulders as it would be from anyone who is over there right now. So we feel the urge and the need and the necessity to step up to the plate just as much as anybody else, because those are our sisters fighting right now. Is there any questions from the audience that we can relay to the panelists? Yes, you, and we will pass a mic to you so that our panelists can hear. If you could please just state your name to the panelists and ask your question.
This is Parian Parshari. I go very quick. I lived in Iran when it was 2000 and 2005, like for 4 years. I agree with Mayor Zomoredi. Well, I think that from her question, I understood in a way that she is not accepting the fact that it's a revolution. And I'm sure it is not a revolution, or at least I think so. But my question is, why do you incline to not recognize it as a revolution?
So the question was whether or not you incline that this was a revolution, and if you don't, why don't you?
Who is he asking that?
Directly to Ms. Chali?
Yes.
Yes, to you.
I never said that I don't recognize this as a revolution. My comment and in my question, as I was asking Mayor Shine, is that in mainstream media, I have noticed that the word revolution has not consistently been used. When I report on the news at Fox 5, I've recognized this as a revolution, and that's the language that I use when I report this. So if you don't think that's a revolution, that is your opinion. And if you're asking me my opinion, this is a revolution. And I've interviewed enough experts and scholars, politicians, attorneys, and people who have studied this region that are very confident to say what they would not have used that word maybe in a few months, can now say that comfortably it is.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And thank you for that clarification. Again, it is a great honor to have these three incredibly powerful, incredibly fearless women. We have another question up in this corner right over here, and if you can hand this to...
Thanks very much. Thanks so much for this fascinating conversation. My question is for you. So my name's Omar Dajani. One of the things that is difficult anytime a movement is trying to affect social change is building up some sort of institutional frame around the social movement. The question that I've got for you is, to what extent we are seeing in Iran right now a shift from a broad-based popular movement to an organized movement that is capable of translating general objectives and grievances into a durable challenge to the regime. And if you're not seeing it just yet, what do you regard as the most promising vectors in Iranian society for movement along those lines?
That's a great question. And I think the key thing is that the Islamic Republic has been very effective at dismantling civil society and the typical engine for that kind of organization. So some people might remember what was called the Green Movement. After June 2009, there was a disputed presidential election in the country. And there was a very or viewed as a stolen election. The rallying cry was, "Where is my vote?" I mean, that was a slogan. So it was a very reformist leaning slogan, actually, because it was giving legit institutions and simply saying that the institutions were being delegitimized, but it's still believed in the institutions. I think what we're seeing now is just a rejection of the system as a whole. So there's really not a lot of demands other than the Islamic Republic has to go, which makes it very different than the protests that we saw in 2009, where there were clear demands around what the protesters were expecting. I mean, and there was a range of demands. The demand now is clear. It's just, we don't want the Islamic Republic. Now that's easy to say, much more difficult to operationalize, obviously, as we would know. But the major difference between this kind of protest movement and what we see now with a lot of movements in a lot of countries is the sort of globalized nature of it. So the fact that social media has been such a key component of how we actually see the violations that are happening on the ground in the country and the way that people have connected, it really means there's not as much a bridge between Iranians living outside of Iran and Iranians inside Iran now. I think 10 years ago, we couldn't really say that. Things have changed enormously. And I know that probably all of our inboxes are just filled with, especially on Instagram, because Iranians can access Instagram pretty easily still. They're just filled with messages about what they're asking us to do on the outside and how they're asking us to help support them on the inside. And so that kind of barrier is not as much there. Now, whether or not there will be a more structured system that will emerge in the country that can be an engine for some of these protests is, I think, an open question. I know there are different loose coalitions that are organizing that, but I think part of the reason that the Islamic Republic also hasn't been successful in quelling the protests is because it's decentralized. So in the very beginning, they made a preemptive move by arresting a lot of our leading thinkers, a lot of the longtime activists in the country, journalists, lawyers, anybody that they thought could represent a threat. And that had absolutely no impact on stopping the protests, because now it's like lots of young people that are simply mobilized at getting rid of this regime at any cost, more or less. So I think what we're seeing is very different, and we may not even see the emergence of a centralized structure, and it may not actually matter in this case. But the more tactical questions about what needs to happen, the one thing I'll say is that we need to see more defections from the Islamic Republic. If we can't incentivize a pathway for regime officials to defect, it's going to be very difficult to see how the regime will crumble. But fortunately, that's not my area of work, given that I'm not focused on that. So I will leave that heavy question to somebody else to sort out.
Thank you so much. Is there any other questions from our guest? And yes, we have one more question. So I will hand off the mic. Is there a mic?
Thank you so much. This is Diba Saifi. Just basically, I want to express my feeling towards Iranian. You know, currently Afghanistan, Iranian, they are at the same boat, and I truly feel the pain of Iran people, and we are truly supporting them, and we are with Iranian women and people. As you know, the situation is very bad in Afghanistan too, and we are so sorry for that. Basically, even my 10-year-old daughter yesterday, she had a presentation about MESAA in the class, and she's here, Hosna Saifi. She had a presentation, and she wanted to explain to her fellow classmates about the situation and what happened to Iran, and she's very sorry for that. But my question here, as of today, we see there is no changes in the policy of government, of Islamic government of Iran. And my question would be just, what would be your thoughts that at the end of the day, would there be any changes or no? As previously it was proved that they couldn't change anything, even people tried their best. But what would be your thought, like this time, would there happen something at the end of the day, or no, still people will suffer from these, injustice and these problems? Thank you so much.
Mayor Shine and Gisu, would either one of you like to answer that?
I didn't understand the question actually, so
Yes.
if someone can reframe that.
So the question was regarding the
I
changes.
think she's asking if at the end of the day,
We think anything will change, basically. Like, do we
Oh.
think anything's going to change?
not
And I
every-
think we all think the Islamic Republic's at an end. Maybe
Yes.
I'll let you take your you take your take on it.
Same. I very much in agreement that this is the end of the life of the Islamic Republic. So yes, change is coming.
And just to like put a, just one little
yes,
point
and
on
if
it.
I may
yeah.
say on top of it, I think things have already changed. A lot has changed. Our communities have changed. How we look at Iran has changed.
Thank you so much. We do have one more honorary guest. We have a daughter of one of the ladies who just spoke and asked a question, and she just wanted to emphasize what it meant to her when she was speaking about MESAA Amini.
Hi, my name is Hasna Saifi, and when I was doing my presentation, when I first found out about Amini, I was deeply emotional because I thought that like Islam would have a turn for the best, but as of last year and currently this year, it has not changed much, and I was very emotional, and I kind of held back tears when I was doing my presentation because she died for such a small reason, and I really hope that no other Iranian, Asian, whatever religion or person or wherever you're from, I hope no one else suffers the cause Amini did. And I know they're still protesting, but hopefully this will soon come to an end. Thank you.
And with that, doesn't get better than that. Young revolutionaries, young women who are genuinely making the change. And you, my friend, are the next generation, and I hope you step up to the plate. And with that, thank you so much to our three panelists, our three speakers. You each are inspirations to me, and I look forward to seeing you all and working with you all again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
We have Dr. Omar Sadir next as our speaker, who is a research fellow at the Center for Governance and Markets in the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh. And previously, Dr. Sadir worked as an assistant professor in political science at the American University of Afghanistan in 2021. And with that, we turn it to you, Dr. Sadir.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for organizing the symposium on the memory of late Professor Hamida Barmaki. It is a true honor for me as a student of Professor Barmaki to talk about her legacy 12 years after her murder and at the time that her country is taken over by the radical Islamists. My talk will briefly touch upon two things. First, as the symposium is in the honor of the uprising of the two Persianate countries, Afghanistan and Iran, I will try to briefly talk first about the shared trajectories of Islamism and modernism in these two countries. In the second part, I will try to talk about how understanding of Professor Barmaki's murder by the Islamists inform us about the nature of the current totalitarian Taliban rule in the country. So the trajectory of politics and social transformation in Afghanistan and Iran so far has been following the same path, albeit with a different quality and magnitude, since the inception of 20th century. The constitutionalist movement to establish a government of law took place simultaneously in both countries in 1906. Later, the modernist Shah of Afghanistan, Hamidullah, established close relationship with Reza Shah of Iran as they tried to match their notes on how to push forward the modernist project in respective countries. The fall of monarchy also happened almost at the same decade in both countries. However, what followed afterward is different in each country. A leftist government close to USSR took over the government in Kabul through a revolution from above in 1973. but an Islamist regime was established in Iran. It did not take very long for the Islamists in Afghanistan to overthrow the leftist government in Kabul and call for a victory of the second Islamic revolution after Iran in Afghanistan. The Islamic revolution in Afghanistan failed in the 90s as different Islamist factions entered into the war with each other, only until the most recently, the fundamentalist Islamist group Taliban made a return to power in August 2021. On the contrary, in Iran, the Islamist regime established a firm ground in terms of control over society. And I think the last shared trajectory that both countries share is, of course, the last uprising of the women in Afghanistan, which happened right after the takeover of Kabul by the Taliban in August 2021. And it didn't last longer that the Iranian woman also stood because of the trigger which happened with the killing of Mahsa Amini. So now, both Islamist regimes came to power through coercion, subjugation of their masses, and forced application of Sharia. In case of Afghanistan, the Taliban has used the most indiscriminate targeted killing and suicide bombing of civilians, academics, and civil society activists. In terms of scope and scale, these indiscriminate atrocities amount to crime against humanity and war crimes. A prime example of this of crime was the murder of Professor Hamida Barmaki and her entire family in a deliberately targeted suicide bombing at the commercial departmental store in downtown Kabul. To understand the nature of Taliban and their ethno-Islamist allies, it's important to unpack the identity of Professor Hamida Barmaki. One can better understand, I suggest, that intersection between Islamism, ethnocentrism, and violation of human rights and humanitarian law to understanding the victim's history, victim's identity and victim history, those who have been victim of Taliban atrocities. So in this case, at least 4 layers of identity are crucial to highlight with respect to Hamida Barmaki. Barmaki was a woman, of course. Secondly, she was a woman, human rights activist, and an academic, and finally a Persian Tajik. All these 4 layers of identity are prime target of Taliban and their ethno-Islamist allies. On their way to usurp power, social engineering, and moral policing of society in Afghanistan at the moment. To begin with, the Taliban have massively deprived women of their basic fundamental rights to the extent that it could be called as gender apartheid in the country. They started by imposing gender segregation in public universities at the time they captured Kabul, but gradually the ban extended to other domains. In March 2022, girls were banned from the secondary high schools. In May 2022, an order from the Amir al-Mu'minin of Taliban called for women to stay at home. Later in November 2022, parks were out of bounds. And finally, in 24th December 2022, Taliban banned women from entering universities. And just yesterday, the new instruction of the regime prohibited women from attending entrance exam of public universities. So this is what, in terms of one of the American academics and modern Middle East scholars, Yuan Cole, the Taliban quoted the female body as inherently private, unquote. But nothing is new in this regard. For instance, as one of the deputy minister of Taliban in 1989, my apologies, explained the regime's policy towards education and ban of women. Quote, he said, the education of girls requires jurisprudential requirement, which is fatwa, that would fix its path and its limits. As for women working outside the house, text concerning that is clear and the matter is incontrovertible. From when the Quran says, stay in your home, the issue requires no further discussion and we have nothing to do but to obey, unquote. So as you see here, the same logic of Taliban 30 years ago also prevails at the moment. But unfortunately, many policymakers, both here in the US and also in Afghanistan, fail to understand the demonic nature of the group. Same as Ayatollahs of Iran, the primary concern of Taliban is reconfiguration of public and private. As again, if I may quote Yuan Cole, radical fundamentalism in any religion challenges the emergence of a reasoned public sphere, favoring forms of authoritarian patriarchy and religious control. Power and faith are reworked as imposed spectacle rather than as a discursive give and take. So here, for example, when Taliban are implementing corporal punishment in public, that is exactly what we can call a spectacle rather than discursive exercise of power. Second, Hamida Barmaki was also an academic, so that's why it's also important to understand what's going on with academia here at the moment under the Taliban regime. Like many other spheres of civil society, Afghanistan academia has been targeted, persecuted, and one can even say diminished under Taliban regime. It's currently dealing with a multifaceted crisis. Free academic practices is absolutely impossible in a regime that restricts and threatens freedom of thought, expression, and consciousness. Critical thinking and free scholarship are not just discouraged, but also systematically punished. The ideological regime of Taliban does not tolerate or allow free and critical academia, and particularly liberal arts. A primary goal of Taliban has been the further Islamization of higher education and academia in Afghanistan. The same trajectory which happened in Iran also when the Islamists came into power. They have started that the university curricula should be revised based on Islamic spirit. The Islamic courses since the takeoff of Kabul has increased 5 to 8. Since fall of the Republic, many scholars have flown the country, including me, and many others are in hiding. While the female scholars are forced to sit at home, the public universities has never been autonomous in Afghanistan, both financially and administratively, but under Taliban, the situation is much more worse. Now, coming to the last layer of identity that I mentioned, of course, Professor Barmaki as a human rights activist, but also, if you also do not neglect the ethnic dimension of it, she was a Tajik intellectual. So currently, at least based on official data that Taliban regime themselves provided, at least 12,000 people are imprisoned in Taliban's prison, but unofficial reports indicate double number. I mean, at least 24,000 people are in prison. Majority of them are political prisoners coming from either Persian Tajiks or other Shia minority Hazaras. Credible reports from the United Nations, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International indicated that how Shia Hazaras are deliberately targeted because of their religion and also race. And also Persian Tajiks in the north of Kabul, who majority of the women who are standing up are also coming from the same constituency, are deliberately imprisoned. I just finished a couple of hours ago another webinar with a woman who was imprisoned and tortured, and she was narrating the horrible histories of what was going on in Taliban prisons, which unfortunately is not properly reflected in the media. So if in case we want to tackle this issue of Islamic fundamentalism, one should not neglect all this, the magnitude of the problem, which encompasses from demolishing of civil society in our societies, but also academia would taken to religious minorities, ethnic minorities, and so on and so forth. A crucial attention is needed here in the US, but also global community to not remain this regime unnoticed, because this is something which is gender apartheid, but also a deeply exclusionary ethnocentric regime, which deprives majority of its own population from their fundamental rights. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Dr. Omar Sadr, thank you very much for your enlightening remarks. We appreciate it. And at this time, our honored guest speaker, Assistant Professor of Law at the American University of Afghanistan, Ghazal Haris, is going to provide her remarks. Ghazal Haris, please.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak in this forum in memory of Professor Hoqoqmal and Professor Barmaki, who were both my professors. And as much as I'm happy to be talking about them, I also must say that it immensely makes me emotional when I think of and when I talk about Professor Barmaki. I studied for my undergraduate at Kabul University, and that's where both the ladies we're talking about today, Professor Hoqoqmal and Barmaki, were teaching, and I was their student. And when it comes to Professor Hoqoqmal, I first got to know her when I was a junior working in human rights. And there I had learned about her being one of the 3 women who participated in the constitutional law in 1964. This was the first time ever women had participated in the discussions or in the process of constitution making in Afghanistan. And then after that, I met her, and after that, I learned that she was not the first to be part of the constitutional law jirga. There are many things that she had done first. Like, she was the first and remained the only female dean of law school at Kabul University. She was the first to start and teach a gender studies course within the law school. And these are just a few of the numerous achievements she has had in Afghanistan and for the women of Afghanistan. What I also vividly remember about Professor Hoqoqmal was the fact that she was very actively participating and playing a role in the early 2000s when the Taliban regime had collapsed and the new government was working towards creating new laws for the government. And that's where people like her came together and wanted to make sure that the new laws that the government is creating are both gender inclusive and sensitive, and that the legal framework protects women as much as it can. Speaking of Professor Barmaki, if there's a lot to talk about her, but if I could summarize it in one sentence, I would say that she has been a professor to me that I highly, highly admired and highly respected. And this was because of who she was. She was a great legal scholar. She was somebody who actually had a passion and dedication for human rights. She was a great human rights activist. Whether she worked for the rights of women, whether she worked on the rights of children, she worked with dedication and with passion. She didn't consider it her job. She considered it her duty to work on human rights. I would consider her, I see her as somebody who changed a lot of lives at Kabul University by just coming to teaching. And at least I am one of those, and I'm sure there are many, many others. And she was the one who taught us that not only we can be female lawyers in a post-Taliban era in Afghanistan, but we could also be change makers and bring change in the country and within the institutions. Her wisdom, her authority made her a different person, a different professor, someone who was always calm, always well composed and articulate, and spoke with a lot of authority in her field. When I first heard of Professor Barmaki's, the attack on Professor Barmaki and her family, it was a devastating time, and everybody was literally crying, hearing about the fact that she was killed, but not just that, but she was killed with her whole family, her entire family. It was devastating. I still remember when I went to her funeral, Professor Hoqoqmal told me, when I offered my condolences, she told me that it's not that she just lost a son or she just lost a daughter-in-law. It was like a bunch of grapes that she lost it as a whole. the son, the daughter-in-law, the kids, and she told me she didn't know which one to mourn first for, and that was heartbreaking. That was listening to a mother who had lost. For us, we had lost a professor, somebody we thought played a huge role in the society. For a mother, it meant something completely different. And the other time, it was extremely heartbreaking when the portrait of Professor Barmaki was created outside of American University of Afghanistan, where I teach, and then it was whitewashed. That was also heartbreaking because even though she was killed in a terrorist attack, the fact that her mural would be put outside of an institution in Afghanistan was not acceptable to the terrorist groups and to those who were responsible for her killing. What I would like to briefly talk about today is not the fact that these two women that we know are among those women who have done incredible work with regards to women's human rights, with regards to women's rights in general in Afghanistan, and to ensuring that they're part of the system, ensuring that the laws favor and protect women, but also to think of what people like Professor Hoqoqmal and Barmaki have done. What has happened to those achievements? Where are we today when we talk about the rights of those women in the country? It's known to all of us that women have historically faced significant barriers in Afghanistan when it comes to fully participating in society and enjoying their basic rights. There have been a lot of disparities between men and women regarding access to their rights, and this has resulted in uneven participation, representation, opportunities for advancement, and also has created an unbalanced role for women in decision-making historically. But women have always fought, they have always struggled. Like we see right now in Afghanistan, brave women still continue to come out on the streets and fight for their rights. They have been the leaders of fights for their own rights and for ensuring that the rights of women in the coming generations are protected. The rights that women gained post-2001 as well is a result of tireless struggle and meaningful contribution of women, starting from the constitution making process in 2004, all the way to the creation of representative institutions, the creation of human rights institutions, the creation of a legal framework that was protecting the rights of the women. But as we have talked, the Taliban have been, as they took power, the first order of business was to completely remove women from public life. And this is not the first time. This was not unexpected. This was something that everybody expected the Taliban would do if they come to power. This is what each and every one of us feared that the Taliban would do once they come to power. And although we understand that women have been deprived of their rights to education, employment, freedom of movement, and these are some of the major issues that we talk about, we also have to keep in mind that this defiance and this violation of women's rights is not just the end of it. This is a trend that's growing in scope and in severity every day in Afghanistan. Like Dr. Sadr said, every day we wake up, we look at the news, and there's something new happening that further curtails the rights and the scope of the rights of women in Afghanistan. What has made me extremely upset about what's happening in Afghanistan and what the Taliban are doing is their denial of justice to women. And that's where people like Professor Barmaki and Professor Hoqoqmal had spent decades of their life struggling to create those mechanisms. But unfortunately, we don't see that anymore. So the Taliban have denied justice to women by stopping them from working in the law enforcement and judicial institutions, but also has denied them the right to access the system and access these institutions. There are no female judges, there are no female prosecutors, no female police within the whole structure. And because there are no women in the overall system, they have also banned female citizens from filing cases through the judicial and through the legal system. They have destroyed the system of protection and assistance for women, and particularly for those who are fleeing domestic violence. They have arbitrarily detained women and girls for disobeying their discriminatory rules. And from what we understand, the women who were arbitrarily detained, the level of torture that one sees there and hears from these individuals is heartbreaking, and it's inconceivable what type and level of torture they have seen. The Taliban have completely shut down the shelters that existed before their arrival in Afghanistan. And those shelters gave shelter to women who would flee their families because of violence. And now one sees that from the reports, we see that either those women were sent back to their families, which puts them in danger, and those were the families that they had escaped in the first place. Secondly, a number of men who were imprisoned and were convicted because of commission of violence against women, they have been set free by the Taliban, and now they pose additional danger to women who had complained against them. And the system that was basically created, the overall justice system that should have protected and upheld fundamental rights of the citizen, is now unfortunately used as a vehicle to infringe on them, and it makes it a lot worse for women. We have seen cases of women being stoned, being lashed publicly without due process, and that makes overall the justice system inaccessible to women, and the justice itself undeniable, the justice itself denied to women. I would like to end by saying that women throughout the history, not just in Afghanistan, but we just heard our Iranian colleagues who talked about and we see in media, the struggle and the suffering of women who are struggling right now. This is not an easy fight. This has never been an easy fight. And they work extremely hard. They sacrifice their lives. They sacrifice their family members to gain those rights and to claim those rights and to ensure that those rights are protected. And then regimes come like the one of the Islamic Republic in Iran or the one of the Taliban in Afghanistan, and then the fundamental rights of people are completely shattered, or the rights of women completely diminished. What we have to remember, not just as citizens of our own countries, but also our call to the world, is that they need to remember that these struggles do not come easily. These struggles are extremely difficult for those who go through it, who sacrifice their lives, and therefore the world needs to stand together in unity for the women of Afghanistan who right now are deprived of each and every basic right. And if the way of dealing with Taliban or the way of interaction with the Taliban is not working, maybe responsibility and change change their method of talking to the Taliban in interaction to make sure that the rights of the citizen and rights of women are protected. I don't think we are at a time when we can afford a whole nation's women to be deprived of their basic right to education or to work or to have access to justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Hares. It is our honor to have you here today. And with that, we will take one small little intermission, stretch your legs, get some food in the back, and we will come back to resume in just 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you again, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to continue. We have 4 more speakers. One of them via Zoom, and the next 3 will be from among us here. We can't wait to begin. And at this time, we invite adjunct professor at Chapman University, Fowler Law School, Spojme Stanekze, to give her remarks. Spojme Stanekze.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't understand why my camera's not working. Is it okay if I just go ahead and start speaking without the video, maybe?
Yes, we'll start working on your video as you're speaking.
Awesome. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's an extraordinary honor to participate in this event today. And thank you to MESAA, of course, University of the Pacific, McGeorge School of Law, and particularly my dear friend, Mr. Barmaki, who allowed me this opportunity to appear among such honorable guests and amazing audience today. I want to say that I want to keep it extremely short because I know that when I was a student, and I still am a student, I could never sit through an event for more than 90 minutes, and it's already been more than 2 hours. So as we gather to honor the legacy of Professor Hamida Barmaki and Professor Mahboba Hoqoqmal and discuss the current human rights violations in Afghanistan and Iran, I would like to highlight how in the past year, millions of Afghan girls and women were gradually erased from public life. I know that there are many human rights violations that are happening in these nations, but my focus today is only going to be on education and on women's rights in Afghanistan. At the start of the new academic year in March, the Taliban announced an indefinite ban on secondary schools for girls, depriving 3.5 million teenagers from receiving education. Now take a few seconds and let that sink in. In April, the Taliban fired thousands of female government employees who were instructed to stay at home under the promise they would be paid their salaries. And that has been discontinued now, of course. Take a few seconds and let that sink in. In May, the Taliban ordered every woman to wear a face mask while appearing on TV, making Afghanistan the only Islamic country to enforce such a rule for public and private television channels. Take a few seconds and let that sink in. In July, they officially excluded women from a grand assembly in Kabul, in which Taliban leaders, they sought domestic legitimacy for men only, representatives from across Afghanistan. Take a few seconds and let that sink in. Very recently, in December 2022, as we were all enjoying the holiday season in this part of the world, the Taliban government issued a statement suspending all women from attending university. And very recently, they did not allow any Afghan women to sit for the university entrance exam. The highest level of education most Afghan girls will be able to attain is grade 6, the final year of primary school. And this comes after they had also banned women from working in private sectors and international organizations. Despite the initial promises that women would be allowed to exercise their rights within Sharia law, including the right to work and to study, the Taliban has systematically excluded women and girls from public life. Over 12 million Afghan women who are deprived from education and millions who are excluded from participating in workforce are paying for the mistakes of an irresponsible decision that was made by the former Afghan government and its international allies. And as Dr. Sima Samar mentioned in the beginning of this event, there was no justice for late Professor Hamida Barmaki, who we are honoring today, and yet there is no justice for women in Afghanistan. And will there ever be any justice for women in Afghanistan, Iran, and many of these countries were run by tyrant regimes is a question that we must ask ourselves today. And I believe this is the reason why we are here today. I'll once again repeat what Dr. Seema Samar said, that our fight for justice must not stop. Indeed, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. As an Afghan woman and professor of law, it deeply pains me to see how little attention is paid to this gender apartheid in Afghanistan. I don't think we have yet come to a conclusion that it is a gender apartheid in Afghanistan. And as someone who had the honor of serving the former Afghan government for 10 years, I do feel responsible towards what's happening in Afghanistan today. That was the reason I never participated in any event, and this was an academic event, and I could finally give myself the right to speak on behalf of these women who have been deprived from education and participating in workforce. And I do want to finish my speech today by apologizing to millions of my fellow Afghan countrywomen. I'm very sorry that we failed and we couldn't do much to preserve their rights, but we're not going to stop. And as we are honoring Professor Hamida Barmaki and Mahboba Hoqoqmal and many other great women throughout the history in Afghanistan and Iran, we must remind ourselves, and I must say that we did not stop back then, and we're not going to stop going forward. I do want to say that, the light will shine again, and hopefully we will have many more events like this that would help us remember these great people in the past who enabled people like me to be where we are today. And hopefully, next time we are here, we will see some good news from Afghanistan. So thank you, everyone. I don't want to take any longer than this. And the floor is yours, Ma'am John and Ms. Fakili.
Merci. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. And I cannot agree more that this light will shine on beyond us. Our next speaker is a speaker from the is the first secretary of the Afghanistan embassy and is an incredible, incredible woman. We have Miss Tarana Pashrai, who's joined from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Afghanistan in 2008. She is also an advocate for women's rights and empowerment. She has additionally worked as the deputy of the Afghanistan Diplomats Association from 2018 to 2019. And we are so honored to have her here with us today. So without further ado, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is the mic.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I know it has been a very long day, and I know it is sometimes it is tiring. I try to keep it very short and to be to the point, I can say. So I'm very honored to be in this symposium to speak very shortly about the legacy of late Professor Hamida Barmaki, and of course how to connect it, how I see the legacy of late Professor Hamida Barmaki related to situation in Afghanistan. And I want to be short because all the time I'm like this. So the legacy from what my other guest speakers talked, and from what Mr. Barmaki he had a presentation about Professor Hamida Barmaki. It is the legacy that rarely in my country, rare people, rare women have it to inspire others, despite all the difficulties, despite all the hardships you raise. You just want to have your voice with all difficulties, with all stigmas in the society that you are facing. And this is the thing that encouraged me to, this is to enable me to connect it with this situation in Afghanistan. You know, in Afghanistan, all the other speakers talked about Afghanistan. I have been the live example of being under Taliban when they took over in 1996 for the first time. I personally wore a burqa, which we call it chadari, which is the, at least it was for me. I just talking with, about me, not the others, because there are people, there are women who wore it, or they wear it and they don't have problem. But for me and the people like me, the woman like me, it was the most humiliating, like a situation to not to be behaved or not to be interact with you like a very normal people with others. So it is like behind a very window, very small, very narrow window, and I couldn't walk because it was really difficult for me. I wasn't, and at that time I was in my teenage period. I mean, it was, I saw a world beautifully with freedom, with being yourself in the society as a woman, as a human being. It is just not a woman as a human being. But suddenly they came. They took power and just don't go to school. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. Even I remember I loved and I love it, the music. And that time we were all the time when we were playing the radio, we were really worried about the volume of this music. That okay, there will not be any loud voice. That Taliban will come and knock the door and maybe talk with him, my brother or my father. So this is the situation now, and they are, the one thing that they are making, Taliban, is they are building a fear. So it is, this is fear. It is, they say to you that this is your place. You cannot go, you cannot think from this level upper. And this is what I fear the most, because I don't want Afghan women to lower their expectations. It is not like a motto. I'm not a kind of person because I have been in politics. I know how the politics works. I know how the countries, how other countries, neighboring countries, internationally, regionally, I know how they regulate their policies. But beside all these things, I know that this is the way to go ahead. The only way is that we should not lower our expectations. And we should not think that, okay, this is it, this is the end of it. And what is from late Professor Hamida Barmaki, from the study that I had, from the articles that I had from her, that please continue, please don't stop here, please think that, please make your voice, please, and this is, I'm talking I'm talking with the Afghan, at least the Afghan who are talking to the media. When they are talking, they are just like, this is a kind of thing, they are setting their mind that, okay, work with Taliban. There are some problems and difficulties that you have with Taliban, yes, but working with Taliban and have expectation from them to, for example, to understand what the other world community is saying. It is waste of time. So this is period. They will not. So I was reading. I have lots of things to say. There was a report of a UN delegation just came from Afghanistan. And there was the way how they they talked to the media. It was really interesting for me because they said that, okay, we have hope. I mean, there are talkings. We have hope that some restriction must be lifted. So with this kind of thing, how you convey, I mean, the Afghan woman who is under Taliban suppression, under Taliban tyranny regime, terrorist regimes, how they really think that someone is out there as helping. Please, I just don't want to go to so many things, but I just want to say that for Afghanistan, for Afghan people, for Afghan women, the only way is we should have a very strong voice, no matter what is going on in Afghanistan. And we should not lower our expectation. We should not think that this is it. And we should, for the Afghans, please do not just manipulate the media with this kind of notion that, okay, this is it, the Taliban is coming, and you should do this, and you should work with them. Try to be strong voices for Afghan people, for Afghan women, to be themselves, because it is our basic right. It is not the kind of thing. Sometimes I see that people say, okay, if there's an education system, if Taliban allow women to go to school, it's okay. It's not okay. It's our basic rights, and it is the duty of the who are at the government, who governs, that to prepare this kind of situation for Afghanistan. And once more, I really thank you. I don't know how I just thought went ahead about my talkings, but this is all I wanted. So I am not lowering my expectation. I request from women, do not lower your expectation, and because this is our basic rights. This is our basic rights, and we should be very strong, no matter how, no matter what, and everywhere, every corner that you are, just try to advocate for your voice for women. Thank you so much.
I could not agree more about how serious the situation is, that a basic human right that we all here in the West take for granted is not naturally given to the rest of us in countries like Afghanistan, Iran, and other places. So I thank you for your talk. Thank you for that. Our next guest, we have Ms. Shamim Noura Joya. So I probably butchered the way that I pronunciated that, my Farsi, my Iranian American coming out. But I do want to point out that our next speaker is kind of a legend. She is the second female fighter pilot in the Afghanistan Air Force. What an incredible thing that is. And without further ado, I'm going to let her take the wheel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope it works. A little bit nervous because it took me 2 years to be back on a platform where I can express my feelings and my experiences. I'd like to start my speech with universal Islamic greeting of Assalamu alaikum. Today, I'm here to present my first public speech after 1 year and 5 months of leaving my homeland. And I'm extremely honored to have an opportunity to address such a distinguished audience. First of all, I would like to thank the Middle Eastern and South Asian Association, the McGeorge School of Law, and all knowledge holders who paved the way for such an event to honor the legacies of those who made great progress in human rights and especially women's rights. I recognize the resilience and strength of the diverse people of America and appreciate the sharing of knowledge and experience which affect the lives of so many women across the globe. I would like to take this opportunity to thank late Professor Hamida Barmaki, whose selflessness and sacrifices will never be forgotten. And the advice she gave me about hard work and integrity, and the wisdom she shared. Wisdom I will carry the rest of my life. I would also like to thank my mother, Bibi Hawar Nuri. Her unconditional love and support has given me the strength to get through some of the hardest moments in my life. Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand here as a young woman from a country who has faced a half-century of difficulties and trauma. As a devout Muslim, proud of her faith, and as an Afghan, proud of her heritage. I'm grateful for all the opportunities in this beautiful country I now call my home. People travel from all parts of the world in the hope of calling America their home. But did I have the same hope? How did I end up here in the United States? A cold winter morning, I was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, as the first child of a young couple. When the Cold War ended and Afghanistan collapsed into several wars which end when Taliban took the control, my parents thought that there wasn't a safe and worthwhile future for us. They made the tough decision of leaving their homeland. Raising 6 kids was not an easy task for my parents. It was a huge responsibility with a ton of hard work. But in spite of all difficulties and discrimination my parents faced as a refugee, they never failed to fulfill our dreams. After 14 years of struggling and hard work, my family, like thousands of other Afghans, returned to their homeland. September 2006 was the year I returned to Afghanistan with my family, and finally had an answer to the questions I would always ask about my homeland. Questions like, where are we from? Did Afghanistan have a national anthem? Did Afghanistan have a national flag? Typical questions a young refugee asks about her homeland she barely remembered. Returning to Afghanistan, I was no longer a refugee. I was in my own country. I had my own national flag, a flag I was so proud of. I remember every morning I start my days talking to that flag, telling it that I'm going to do something very great for you, and I will make you proud. But it was never easy, especially for me being a terrified teenager, unfamiliar to the society and its rules and regulations and boundaries. My mother at the time was the only one who supported me and believed in me. Growing up, whenever I thought about what bravery meant, I was thinking about, the only person I was thinking was her, until I met one of her friends, late Professor Hamida Barmaki. She was equally kind, brave and beautiful, just like my mother. I remember the first time I met her, she held my hands and looked me in the eyes and told me, my dear girl, you will be very successful one day. But don't forget to, don't be afraid of anything. Don't settle for less. The last time I spoke with her was a Thursday night, sometime in 2011. The next morning, I woke up and she had passed. She was no longer with me. but her lessons and her words of encouragement will always remain with me. 5 years later, I graduated from Kabul University, Islamic Law and Sharia faculty. At the same time, I was working as program manager in Khorasan Legal Services Organization, which was one of the organizations established by Professor Hamida Barmaki to help and support Afghan women. Life is short and very unpredictable. You cannot take a moment for granted. So I realized in order to live a productive and impactful life and contribute toward my role model's legacy, I must seek every opportunity that comes on my way to fulfill my dreams. Being the oldest child of my parents and sharing the responsibilities with my family never stopped me of dreaming big. Becoming a pilot and joining Afghan Air Force was one of those dreams. But it was very difficult. It was not easy. 2016 was the year I finally joined Afghan Air Force. Of course, in a country where being alive and surviving was more to do with being lucky, making such a decision not only changed my personal life, but changed the life for my family too. In those days and nights, living as a civilian was not safe. So imagine how life could be for a military person, especially a military female pilot. What added to those concerns and views was the opinion of Afghan society regarding this profession. Only men had the right and the ability to serve the armed forces, and only men had the right and the ability to fly over Hindukush Mountain. It was a difficult task, being the only girl studying in a class of 125 other male cadets. My days started with contemptuous looks and discrimination and comments about my presence there. I did my best to excel in my studies in the hope that if I do good or I perform good in my studies, they will accept me as an equal, as their equal. After completing 1 year of theoretical studies, while I was waiting to complete my studies, my documentation and paperwork to go to Czech Republic for my training, I was chosen to work in Ministry of Defense, in Strategic Relation Department. That was when Asadullah Khalid was working as acting Defense Minister of Afghanistan, and the Al-Fatah Jihadi operation was announced by Taliban. Unlike the previous years, the Taliban did not prioritize attacks on US and NATO forces, but instead they were more focused on those people who were working for Afghan government and serving in military and police. Explosions, security, warnings had become a part of my daily life. I stopped going out of my house with my family just in case I was attacked or shot. I didn't want them to get harmed. Life has its own way of throwing figurative punches. The onus is on to us to take every challenge as an opportunity to grow and as a lesson to learn. The challenges and the problems of Afghan service women in that kind of society was more than I can summarize in few sentences. During the time I was working in the Ministry of Defense, I realized that the problems that those women are facing are more than economic and security threats and issues. Facing the contemptuous looks and judgments of the society, men, and even women, toward their characters. The military uniform, which was a sign of courage, bravery, and loyalty, but whenever an Afghan woman wore it, it was a sign for everyone around her to despise her. These women were not only fighting a common enemy of Afghan people, but they were fighting the outdated social standards and, in some cases, their own family opinions, which society says as a suitable behavior for women. Being one of those women gave me the strength to face the challenges. November 2020, after completing my training in Czech Republic and returning back to home, I was selected to fly a fighter aircraft called AC Attack 208. Returning to Kabul, I found the security situation even worse than before. almost after a week, almost every week or after a week, I witnessed assassination of pilots or military personnel. Leaving the house every morning for the air base, I could hear the fear in my parents' voice while they were saying goodbye to me. On 14 August 2021, I leave my house around 2 a.m. in the morning for another mission flight, which was supporting the ground forces. Leaving that morning, I had no idea that it's my last time walking out of my house. I prepared my flight plan, and as I was walking to the aircraft, I got an order from the squadron commander to return back to squadron. Because Afghan President Ashraf Ghani fled and Taliban claimed the control of Kabul. I had returned 20 years back, and all achievements and progress Afghan women had won were lost or suppressed. Another generation abandoned. A nation of 37 million people, where half of that population is women, left with another disaster. Once again, Afghan women lost their basic rights. Despite all the challenges which made life extremely hard for every single person living in that country, especially women, but they didn't give up. And now the responsibility they are taking on their shoulders is behalf of every living human to save humanity. The bravery of Afghan women over generation is historical. So I hope the free-thinking people all around the world will help to ensure that Afghan women are not forgotten. Afghan women like late Professor Hamida Barmaki and countless of other women who sacrificed their life and lost their life and fight for a free Afghanistan. And how each of them resisted in their own way for a generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shamim John, for your remarks. And at this point, we have our last speaker among us. I'm going to ask Anisa Amani, teacher and educator, to share her words with us. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anisa Amani. I am a proud first-generation Afghan Muslim American. I am honored to be here with all of you at UOP's McGeorge School of Law. We are here to remember and celebrate the revolutionary women's rights movement of our sisters in Iran and Afghanistan. We are here because of the legacy left behind of Professor Hamida Barmaki and Professor Mahboba Hoqoqmal, may they rest in power, and to consider the courageous women whose names we will never know. The sisterhood of oppressed women and girls is not only rooted in pain, sorrow, and suffering, but in unity through empathy, grace, and a fierce desire to demand equality. Our women have a thirst for knowledge and an internal responsibility to contribute to society and make their lives and countries better. The women of my region are incredibly powerful. They have the courage to stand in the face of injustice, the fearlessness to fight for equality, and the inability to be silenced and tell the truth, even if the world refuses to listen. Their voices remain loud. Our women have inherited the willingness to challenge and resist the corrupt regime of Iran and the barbaric occupation of Afghanistan at the hands of the Taliban. Many people throughout the world often wonder, how does this hell on earth exist for the women and girls in Iran and Afghanistan? And the answer is actually quite simple and can be explained with one word: misogyny. Misogyny is the hatred of and contempt for women. It is ingrained prejudice against women. It is a form of sexism that is used to keep women at a lower status than men. Misogyny lives in the darkest corners of all societies all over the world, but in Iran and Afghanistan, this dark corner has been brought into the light of everyday life, breathing injustice and hatred against women without any remorse or shame. The regime and the Taliban are attempting to keep women powerless and erase them from society through fear tactics, intimidation, and murder. But still, our women rise, chanting, Zan, Zindagi, Azadi. Non, Kar, Azadi. Women, life, freedom. Food, work, freedom. Afghanistan is the only place on earth where women are not allowed to be working professionals, are prohibited from learning in universities, and are banned from learning in secondary and elementary education. Here in Sacramento, California, I am an educator and community advocate for Afghan refugees and for all learners. This is my 6th year teaching 3rd grade in the Art and Arcade area of Sacramento. My school population is made up of nearly 800 kinder to 5th grade students, and over 60% of our students are Afghan refugees. I am honored to serve my community through my passion for education. I see firsthand the importance of education for our Afghan families and their desire to give their children opportunities they never would have had if they were living in Afghanistan or Iran. Our school's team of educators and staff leads as change makers, working to dismantle the oppressive ideology that Afghan girls are incapable of learning alongside their male counterparts. We ensure all children receive high-quality education. I am actively working to build a culture of freedom of expression where girls can celebrate themselves and be fully supported and loved. As an educator serving a community of Afghan refugees, I see limitations accidentally placed upon our girls in the most subtle of ways. These limitations start as a whisper and get louder, causing irreversible harm to our girls. We must allow our daughters the opportunity to dream big and never hold back their desires for the sake of society or what others might think of them. Women are not responsible for how men perceive them. Women are not responsible to validate men and their fragile egos. Women are not responsible to shrink themselves so men feel powerful and important. The daughters of Iran and Afghanistan were not born to serve the regime or the Taliban. They were born to dream and explore what sparks joy for themselves as free-thinking people. As fathers, brothers, partners, and friends, you must bring awareness to how you treat and speak about women and girls. You must consider the ways in which your own microaggressions show up and contribute to the limitations placed upon women. Men can support women by grabbing them by the hand and lifting them up the way that we see here today. Thank you to all the men that are standing with the women and for the girls in Afghanistan and in Iran. Women make up half of society and are often left out of policy-making decisions which impact their lives, like we see here in the United States. women's rights are human rights. This Friday, I had an essential conversation with one of my Afghan students about when to be kind and when to be selfish. In my classroom, there is a special occasion where I bring in a bunch of toys for my students to pick from at random, as their class numbers are selected by pulling a stick. One of my Afghan girls was chosen early on to select her item, and I noticed that she picked a relatively modest toy for someone who had the opportunity to choose a more extravagant one. When I asked why she chose her item, she answered saying that she wanted to be kind and to give others the opportunity to get the items they wanted. She put them before herself. Although some might find this as a nice and sweet gesture, I found her selflessness alarmingly sad. I was sad to see that an 8-year-old little Afghan girl gave up her desires for the happiness of others so early on in life. I explained to her that there is a time to be kind and a time to be selfish. This was one of those times that I urged her to be selfish and get her wants met without considering others. I wanted to teach her that her needs, wants, and desires matter just as much as her classmates. Young boys are taught to take every opportunity they can, when in contrast, we teach our young girls to give to everyone around them and to consider themselves last. I was proud to guide her in her exploration of self-desire. This is something that as society and as parents, we must teach our daughters. This is a seemingly small moment, but for her, it felt like a tremendous accomplishment. We must encourage girls to stand in their power and to honor their desires in life, to become free from societal expectations of being nice. We must teach them, don't be a lady, be a legend. The girls of Iran and Afghanistan are deserving of basic human rights to education, health, and safety, which is free from harm. Their strength, determination, and grace is inspiring to women everywhere fighting for freedom and equality. I stand with them for their extraordinary courage. Our nation's borders do not make us different. This revolution began in search of a resolution, and today we can amplify their voices. We must stand together to ensure that the world does not forget about the bravery of our girls. For you can cut down the flower, but nothing can stop the coming of the spring. Thank you.
I would like to add that Anissa is someone who I have known for most of my life. So she is a dear friend of mine, and I'm so grateful to have such a legend here today. Don't be a lady, be a legend. What a powerful message that I hope that many women and girls around the world here today can take. So thank you, Anissa. I kind of wanted to just close today, what a very beautiful day we've had together, to say that me as an Iranian American woman, I came here, I was here. My family came here over 43 years ago during the initial revolution in Iran. They escaped during nightfall, and that's the reason I'm standing here today. So without their efforts and the legends before me, I wouldn't be here. I'm gonna do everything I can without being emotional. 16-year-old Sarina Esmailzadeh in Iran made a video. Sorry. And in that video, when I watched it, Serena stated a few things that really resonated with me, if I could share with everybody today. And she was recently killed by the regime in Iran. But she stated some things that transcended her, and I think that they really do speak. And I think that I would love to share her words with us today, so maybe we can hear her echo and what she gave us. So she said, what are the needs of a 16-year-old teenager? She said, giving, love and being loved, and being in love. We need joy and recreation, good spirit, good vibes, good energy. In order to love these, we need freedom. Because of all these things, that is the most important thing. Freedom is life, and freedom is loading. Azadi is loading, as she stated. What is better than feeling free? To girls like Serena, Nika Shakharami, MESAA Amini, Professor Barmaki, and all the professors, Baraya Azadi, for freedom. I call Fahim up here and we can thank you together. Thank you.
What a powerful message and what a day. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating, for coming here. I hope that you guys have been able to take just a word, if nothing else, and to have heard the other side of the world, and to have heard a little bit about what is going on and ponder, if possible, what we can do and what you can do when you leave this room. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. We urge you all now, please begin that conversation. That's the only way.